On the other hand, when he says no one could have foreseen this, this is what I've called an intellectual cover-up. Then I say that because it's very disingenuous. Over the past 20 years, these banks used their economic power and their political power to engineer an unregulated financial environment in which precisely this sort of thing could happen. And in that sense, I think that this was not an accident, it was not a natural disaster, it was not unforeseeable. It was the product of the efforts by the sector over the past 20 years to reshape Washington and to engineer an environment that would allow them to make as much money as possible. Simon talked earlier about money, and we know that the financial sector, especially Wall Street, has made enormous contributions to both campaign contributions and lobbying expenses. But I think there were two more potent weapons in their arsenal. One is the revolving door. So we've seen an enormous number of people passing back and forth between Washington and Wall Street over the past 20 years. This is not a new phenomenon. It happens in every industry. But there's certain things that make it especially pernicious when it comes to finance. One is the question of incentives. So compared to other industries, Wall Street can simply offer enormous amounts of money. I'm not saying that everyone did that. I'm not saying that even a majority of people did that. But that is very clear.
The New York Times had a story this week saying that 125 former members of Congress and staffers are now working for the financial industry in Washington. One of them is Michael Oxley, whose name is on one of the most important pieces of business legislation in the last 20 years, the Sarbanes-Oxley bill, which was designed to impose some very strict accounting rules after Enron on all of this. And there he is now. He's a lobbyist for the securities industry.
But Bill, it goes even further and deeper than that. Robert Rubin was Secretary of the Treasury in the 1990s. He oversaw the deregulation. He fought hard against Brooksley Bourne, the only regulator in living memory who tried to prevent derivatives from getting out of control. He then went to Citigroup. He presided over this nonsense and this mess. He's now, and he's clearly an eminence grise for this administration. Mr. Geithner and Mr. Summers are his protégés. But that's not all. Next week, the Hamilton Project, a project at the Brookings Institution founded by Mr. Rubin, will have a big public event, probably Mr. Rubin's most prominent Washington appearance since the crisis broke. The headline act at this event will be Vice President Joe Biden. Now, maybe Mr. Biden will be taking on the view of finance that we all should fear greatly, but I'm not so optimistic.
You know, I don't get it. Recently, when Newsweek wanted to give big space to somebody to explain how we get out of this, who wrote the piece? Robert Rubin. I mean, are they locked into this worldview so that they cannot see the consequences of their own actions?
Well, I think there are a couple things going on. One of the things we talk about in the book is how the Democratic Party became taken over by this Wall Street-friendly view in the 1990s, which is, extremely important because in the 1980s we had a deregulatory administration that was largely opposed by a Democratic Congress. And it became very convenient for Democrats because if you believed in the ideology of finance, you could sincerely think, I am a Democrat, I am a servant of the poor and the working class, and yet I can take campaign contributions from Wall Street because I sincerely believe that Wall Street is doing what's best, what's in the interests of the country. I think it's been exposed in the last year and a half that a lot of what Wall Street did was not in the best interests of the country, not in the interests of the people getting these subprime loans, not in the interests of the taxpayer who is paying for the immense fiscal costs of the financial crisis and the recession. But there's a curious time lag going on in the Wall Street intellectual and political establishment where they think they're still in 2005.
As I travel around the country, Bill, I'm really struck by the fact that while people in Washington talk about populist anger in the country, most of what I encounter is legitimate, sensible anger. That people actually understand what happened. They understand what went wrong, and they want to stop it. And the banks don't get this. The belief system on Wall Street is the same. Jamie Dimon, head of JP Morgan Chase, one of the most powerful men in the country, and if you don't know his name, you should look him up because this is a man to fear.
Very close to the president, has dinner at lunch with the president.
The president called him a savvy businessman recently. Yeah. Jamie Dimon told his shareholders, we just had probably our best year ever. They didn't have their best year ever. They went through crisis. They were saved like the rest of the financial system by the government, by the taxpayers, but that's not how they see it. That's not what they believe. That's really important. That belief must be shaken if we're to make any progress at all.
But we can't compete with those lobbying dollars. We can't compete with this interlocking oligarchy that you say. That's a fact.
No, Bill, in 1902, when Theodore Roosevelt took on the Industrial Trust, nobody knew what he was doing. Nobody thought he could win. The Senate was called the Millionaires Club for a reason. And there wasn't even any theory. The antitrust theory, everything we know and believe about monopoly, why monopoly is bad for society, didn't really exist, certainly not in the mainstream consensus when Roosevelt decided to take on JP Morgan. Okay? 10 years later, the mainstream consensus had shifted completely. People understood from the debate and from the struggle, from the way the trust fought back and the way they spent their money. They began to understand this was profoundly dangerous politically and socially. 1912, everyone agreed that breaking up Standard Oil was a good idea. Had to be done. They broke it into 35 companies. Most of them did well. The shareholders actually made money. It's a very American resolution, Bill. And it's very clear that we've had this confrontation before in American history. Andrew Jackson against the Second Bank of the United States in the 1830s. Jackson won, barely. Theodore Roosevelt, the beginning of the 20th century. FDR in the 1930s. The American democracy was not given to us on a platter. It is not ours for all time, irrespective of our efforts. Either people organize and they find political leadership to take this on, or we are going to be in big trouble, okay? Now, I agree, we don't have Theodore Roosevelt. I agree. The only senator who speaks complete truth and clarity on this issue is Ted Kaufman from Delaware, who is an appointed senator. He appointed Joe Biden's seat, and he's not running for re-election. He therefore doesn't care about the money. I take that point. But there are others. There must be others. We must find them, and we must fund them individually, sufficiently to fight against this nonsense from the corporate sector. I would like to emphasize, Bill, I'm a professor of entrepreneurship. James is a successful entrepreneur. We're not anti-finance. We have many people endorsing the book, backing us, and you know, we put their blurbs in the book for a reason, who are from finance, who really appreciate and understand this key point, which is the complexity has gone too far. It's become dangerous. We need to return our financial system to a simpler, more direct, easier to manage way.
You both paid attention last week to the hearings in Washington on the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission. Was there a theme that you heard emerge there?
I think the biggest theme that I heard emerge was that this was an innocent mistake. So what I mean by that is...
You mean the collapse of 2008, all of it? was
exactly.
An accident?
Yes, an accident in the sense
Natural
that,
disaster.
as we heard Chuck Prince say and Robert Rubin say, we couldn't see it coming. There were risks that built up in the system, and our models didn't account for it. We're sorry that it happened. Not even we're sorry that we did it. We're sorry that it happened. And I think that this is... I mean, it's unfortunate if they really believe this, because again, if we just take a very small example, one of the things that clearly went wrong is these banks were not able to manage their own risk. They did not know what positions they had. They did not know what market forces they were exposed to. You would think that should be the first job of a bank. And I don't think this was an innocent mistake. And I say that for this reason. It was in the bank's short-term financial interests to underestimate their risk. Because if they had estimated the risk accurately, they would have had to set more capital aside, they would have been less profitable. So, yes, it's possible that the CEOs of these banks honestly did not understand their risk positions. But that mistake, there was an incentive behind that mistake. You know, banks never overestimate their risk. These mistakes always only go in one direction, because that's the direction they have an incentive to make the mistake.
What do you mean they have an incentive to make a mistake?
So in the short term, a bank's profitability is going to depend on how much capital it has to set aside. So in banking, if I have a certain position, I have to set aside a certain amount of capital to protect myself from that position going bad. If I think the position is less risky than it actually is, I'm going to set aside less capital to cover that position, and that's going to give me a higher profit margin. If I'm the head of this bank, that means that in the short term, I'm going to have higher profits, higher stock price, more money for me, but I'm underestimating the risk of something blowing up several years down the line. But we know that essentially the incentive systems within these banks favored short-term profits over long-term solvency.
The most profound thing, observation on this structure, inadvertent, I would say, observation, was by Chuck Prince, the former head of Citigroup, in July 2007, right before the whole structure began to crumble. He said, as long as the music is playing, you've got to get up and dance. Okay? And that's a statement about the incentive structure, saying, well, everybody's doing it. That's how we all make money. We've got to do it too. I'm just a bank doing what all the other banks are doing. That's absolutely the heart of the problem. I would also say and tell you and emphasize, these people will not come out and debate with us. The heads of these companies, all their representatives, they will not come out. They're afraid. They don't have the substance. They don't have the arguments. We have the evidence. They have the lobbyists, and that's all they have.
They've got the power, the muscle, the money.
They have money.
You just have the argument. You just have the facts on your side.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it comes down to.